Thank you for tuning in to the Week 7 Injuries, News, and Notes podcast that Jeff Bell and I do every single week, where we take a look at every upcoming matchup, discussing the injuries, news, notes, and some takes and takeaways, things that we'll be watching going into every single matchup. First of all, bye weeks. We got the Buffalo Bills and Baltimore Ravens, two very good and prominent offenses on bye this week, so get those guys out of your lineup. But first things first, Jeff, Thursday Night Football last night. That was a better game than I think a lot of people expected. The Icy Hot Bowl lived up to the bill. And I think the first question I have for you, bad run out with the Joe Burrow injury for people who drafted Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown. Is Joe Flacco the savior here? Are all of our Bengals back to life now?
I mean, probably not what you drafted or thought you were getting when you drafted, but at the same time, definitely utility, definitely usability. We saw Jamar Chase last night, the explosion there. We saw T. Higgins. We saw Chase Brown look better than he's looked all year. And I think that that's the biggest thing that this franchise just desperately needed. And we talked last night with our friend Matt Waldman on the live show about when Jake Browning played in 2023. It was towards the end of the season. Expectations were basically done because we knew Joe Burrow was out for the year. So it was house money from the start. And then I think this year, he's coming into that situation. The expectation would be Joe Burrow would be back. Your job is to keep us alive until Joe gets back. And that's a different amount of pressure that he was dealing with. I think things just started to spiral, and it brought the entire locker room down with it. And then you bring Joe Flacco in, and Joe Flacco, it did make me laugh because when he was traded, somebody had asked him the question of like, why did you want to be traded to the Bengals? And it's like, he's a quarterback. He gets to go play with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. He just got benched on one of the worst teams, worst offenses in the league. What do you mean? Why do you want to go play for the Bengals? Like, some of these things that get asked are just wild to me, but I think it just brought in a new life to the organization. Just the locker room lifted everybody up, and so much of the NFL season, I think, is all about momentum. Is maybe the right word, maybe the wrong word, but just the direction that things are trending. And I think that was just a desperately needed breath of life. And then for Joe Flacco as well, how, you get fired, basically, you get benched, and then, here, go play with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I mean, who wouldn't be thrilled at that?
Exactly. And I think, this, I don't want to say it's a better situation than it would be with Joe Burrow. But I could also, I want to push back on anybody who said that either, because Joe Burrow at this point, he's somebody who wants to spread the ball around. We're going to see Andre Yosevich, we're going to see Noah Fant and Mike Gesicki and other guys get involved in the offense as well. Where I think Joe Flacco, he's here for a good time, not a long time. He doesn't really care about getting other people involved. He doesn't care about showcasing anything. He's like, I got two guys out here that I'm just going to force the ball to in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And it's kind of nice for people who are rostering those guys.
Other people got involved, though, is the other thing of it. Yosevich did get involved. And
what did he have? 3 catches, I believe?
3 catches for about 45, 50 yards, I believe, because he hit that one big play. And I know it was 4 targets because I was paying attention to the number 4 for no reasons at all with Andre Yosevich. But and then Fant obviously had the touchdown. And I do think it's funny, just narrative-wise, of Noah Fant's first career catch, first career touchdown came from Joe Flacco. And
really?
Just kind of, yeah, back in the Denver days when
Denver,
the rookie was I think it was only 1 year that Flacco, and it was really 8 games that he was the quarterback for the Broncos, but it was Noah Fant's rookie year. So they're just a long time reconnection happening again.
Yeah, we talked about that one on an episode not too long ago, talking about Deshaun Hamilton and some of the guys on that Broncos team. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump into this one, Jeff. We've got only 2 teams on bye, so we have a lot of games to discuss today. And let's start with the international game, which, they're fun every now and then, but doing them every single weekend, it feels like it's starting to run its course a little bit. So we're going to be waking up early on Sunday to watch the Los Angeles Rams against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Puka Nacua, of course, has not practiced yet this week, still dealing with that ankle injury. Sounds like there is a very, very, very slim chance, I'd say almost zero, that he'll be out there. So plan to not have Puka Nacua in your lineups. Tutu Atwell was limited on Wednesday with a hamstring injury, but full participation on Thursday. He should be good to go. Blake Corum dealing with a shoulder injury, didn't practice, with an ankle injury, didn't practice on Wednesday, but moved to a limited participation on Thursday. And then Dyami Brown for the Jaguars has not practiced this week. He's been dealing with this shoulder injury for the last few weeks now. So, Jeff, I think the thing that most people are going to be watching here is just how high the ceiling is going to be for Devontae Adams without Puka Nacua. We've seen him and Puka Nacua have kind of been in a 50-50 split Puka Nacua has caught more balls and been more efficient with the ball in his hands. But this is one where, like, is it crazy to think that we can see, like, similar to what Jamar Chase saw last night, like 16 catches, 20 targets? Like, that's not out of the realm of possibility for Davante Adams in this game.
No, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. And I think that if you were to really break it down on who's covering the Rams receiver, Davante Adams, I think, has been drawing number one coverage more than Puka Nacua. And people be flabbergasted at that and say, well, what do you mean? There's a reason why Puka Nacua has been able to do the things that he's been able to do, because teams are looking at Davante Adams as a prime elite receiver and focusing coverage in that direction. So, and that's not going to change for Adams, but you'll probably get in a situation where Stafford will be a little bit more intentional with giving him targets. And I do think that ceiling's there. You mentioned the lending games. I think it cracks me up because East Coast dads is a thing, and like the prime time thing and everything. And for years and years, like the West Coast just laughs at those messages. And for me, a 9:30 kick time, it's kind of nice on a Sunday morning. I'm up and, I've been up with the kids and kind of just get to settle in and watch some football. And so I think it's just it's karma in life. Like, if you're going to be bragging about how these games end at 7:00 and you can have a night afterwards, then sometimes you're going to get up at 6:30 in the morning to watch football.
And I don't mind it. I get up at 7:30 here in Colorado. Well, the game starts at 7:30 here in Colorado, so of course, making sure all my fantasy lineups are set, inactive players are pulled for my rankings and stuff like that. I'm an early riser anyway, so yeah, my Sundays usually start around 6 a.m. Get a little bit of work in, get some coffee down, have some breakfast ready by the time the games kick off. But it's a slog of a day when you're watching football from 7:30 a.m. until 10 p.m. And I mean, there could be worse ways to spend your day, but it gets long. And especially, I think the worst part of it is that these games like rarely live up to the billing, like the jet lag and the travel and the unfamiliar environments. So it's not like we're waking up to watch these like high powered, exciting football games. We're watching like two bottom of the barrel teams just kind of go like do a 6-9 field goal match. And this one could be a little bit better. I mean, Jacksonville, like they go to England all the time. Like, they should have this travel figured out by now. We look, there's a lot of veterans on the Rams. This is a good offense as well. So I'm hopeful that this can be one of the better games that we've seen this year, but we'll see how that one goes. Anything else you're going to be watching here, Jeff? I am paying close attention. I mean, it's not like we're benching Kyren Williams anyway, but I think if Blake Corum is out, we've seen him consistently handling like 30 to 40% of the touches. If Kyren Williams goes out here with 100% runway, he could have a huge week against this Jaguars defense.
I mean, we talked about percentages earlier this week. Like, I hear you on that, but then it also is like 5 touches, like for Blake Corum. So I think when you really break down the numbers, and especially it's not just Blake Corum being out, but also the potential of Puka Nacua being out, and the involvement in the passing game that we've seen from Kyren Williams from the last couple of weeks. All those things add up to what should be a great spot for Kyren Williams in this matchup. Great spot for Davante Adams. I think that if you're desperate, you're looking at Tutu Atwell, you're looking at Jordan Whittington in those Rams wide receivers should Tutu Atwell be active. I mean, I know you would prefer Whittington in that situation. I think I'm a little bit tossed up there, but I'd like the potential of Atwell to hit a big play. And then
I might take the cop out and say that like I prefer Whittington in PPR and Tutu Atwell in standard, because I could see Whittington kind of having one of those like 6 catches for 30 yards sort of game, where Tutu Atwell, all he needs are 2 targets to pop one off for a 60-yard touchdown.
Yeah, and then you look at the Jacksonville side, and I know that there's a lot of hand-wringing about Travis Hunter, but it's really not even the way that offense is built, I think, to right now, the way that they're functioning offense, because they're treating Brian Thomas like a number 1 receiver. And I think they've kind of rebuilt his confidence a little bit from that week 2 performance against Cincinnati. We see him trending upward. And so they've been treating him like that. And we really just missed a massive week last week. And it's one of those that this is why I got to be paying attention and watching the game, because you see 90 and a touchdown and you think, okay, like, good game for Brian Thomas, and you realize if you
could have been a great game,
it should be 150 and 2 touchdowns. So that's kind of where we're trending with Thomas here, and I would expect that to continue. But the hand wringing over Travis Hunter, it's just they're spreading the ball around outside of Thomas. Everybody's getting involved. There's not like opportunity to be forcing the ball to Hunter just because of the way of the function of what the offense is doing.
So are you buying into any of the Liam Cohen comments where he's talking about wanting to get Travis Hunter more involved, that he wants him to be like the primary read on some passing down plays? Is that something that you're buying into, or is it like, you got to see it before you're believing it?
I mean, Liam Cohen has been telling us the same thing for 3 months, I feel like, at this point. So, yeah, I think what's the ceiling? I mean, the ceiling is like he could go for 150 because he's that talented. But I mean, realistically, you're looking at 4 catches and 60 yards probably for Hunter. But like that's what the offense is allowing with the way that they're treating Thomas and the way that they are just again spreading the ball around. I know Parker Washington's frustrating for fantasy football managers, but he's not a terrible player. And you've got these running
Yeah.
backs that you can kind of utilize as well. Obviously, Brenton Strange is out, but Brenton Strange, I think, is a little bit more of a blocker than people realized at the start of the
Yeah.
season.
And I want to say Parker Washington, he's really good at the need that they have, which is a guy who can catch balls through traffic across the middle of the field. And that's why we're seeing Parker Washington do this, because nobody else in this Jaguars receiver room really has that skill set.
We do have a revenge Hunter Long revenge game. So and Johnny Munt too, the tight end too. They were both Rams, and there's some through ties between these organizations. Obviously, with Liam Cohen spending a period of his career as an offense coordinator for Sean McVay. So
And James
the tight
Gladstone,
ends
of
here.
course, as well. Yeah, James
Yes,
Gladstone
James
going over.
Gladstone as
Yeah, so
well,
there's
obviously.
a lot,
Yep.
lot of connections in this game. This should be a fun one. But Jeff, let's get on to the early games kicking off at 1 p.m. Eastern. New Orleans Saints going to Chicago to play against the Bears. Alvin Kamara didn't practice on Wednesday, but was limited on Thursday. He's dealing with minor ankle injury. Chris Olave limited on Wednesday, full participant on Thursday. So we expect to see him out there, even though he's got a hip on the injury report. DJ Moore, hip/groin. Still some speculation as to what actually happened there, but didn't practice Wednesday, limited on Thursday, trending in the right direction. We'll see if he's able to play on Sunday. And a lot of that is going to come down to whether he's able to practice today on Friday or not. And then DeAndre Swift, not on Wednesday's injury report, but popped up on Thursday's in a limited fashion. So that's never a good sign. We'll wait for more news on that. But first things first, let's talk about the Saints here. Alvin Kamara, this does feel like a good matchup for him. This is one where the Bears are favorites, so we'd expect the game script would push them into a situation where they have to throw the ball. We know this is a bad Bears offense as well. Is this one where you're a little bit more aggressive maybe this week on Alvin Kamara than we've been in weeks past?
I'm really hesitant to be aggressive on Alvin Kamara at this point in time. I think is probably where I'm sitting that. There's certainly lineups where you're putting him in situations where you have to play him, especially considering his ADP, what you paid for him. But at the same time, to get him outside of, I think, low end running back 2 status right now is not somewhere that I'm willing to go, even with the matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I've got him at RB20, which is higher than I've been ranking him in previous weeks, but still, like you said, yeah, kind of a low end RB2. But I think this is a matchup where he could potentially have a ceiling that we haven't really seen so far this
So
year. And I mean, his consensus, yeah, I mean, consensus ranking is RB24. So it's kind of at that RB2, RB3 bubble, which, like you said, not where we drafted him to be.
we know there's not going to be goal line because they've got Taysom Hill back, and so Taysom Hill's going to be a goal line back. We know that. I don't think that Kendrick Miller is. You're not going to unplug him. I think from what you've been seeing in
Right.
the offense, and so sure, matchup wise, and we should probably lean into matchups a little bit more than I think that the start your studs mentality. But Alvin Kamara doesn't qualify as a stud anymore, and so that's where it's kind of, if a guy has to score from 20 yards out and needs to catch 5 balls, I feel like to be super fantasy relevant, you're always going to be playing with fire at some level.
So let's talk about the Bears a little bit. I know there was a lot of excitement about Luther Burden,
You talk
especially
real
with yeah,
Just Olave real quick. He's got the second most targets in the league. He should
yep,
have the most targets in the league after this week. He's like wide receiver 26 in a half PPR scoring. At some
huge buy.
point, yeah, huge buy. At some point that has to correct. And we saw it start a little bit last week, 98 yards last week. They've
And
just missed
also
on
a
some big plays
touchdown
too.
that hit him in the hands. Like he had a wide open play where like Spencer Rattler put it on the money and it was in and out of his hands. So I mean, like we could have been looking at, like you said, with Brian Thomas Jr., people see the 80 yards and a touchdown and think, hey, that was a good game. But like Olave, they see 90 yards, think, hey, that was a good game. It should have been 130 yards and a touchdown, which then people would be way over their skis. But Olave, this isn't just this year. I was just looking at this the other day. Shoot, I don't have the numbers in front of me. It's 2 touchdowns in his last 108 targets, I believe. I just talked with Julia Papworth on the launch pad about this yesterday, but this plagued him last year as well. And that's kind of the conversation that Julia and I had. Like, is this a fluke or is this just him being a victim of a bad offense? And I think it's a little bit of both. Like, yeah, you want to count on touchdown regression, but guys are much more likely to regress positively to touchdowns when they're on a good offense that's scoring touchdowns. And we just haven't really seen that from New Orleans the last couple of years. So, yes, I think that there are better days ahead, but I also don't think that there's like a 12 touchdown type of ceiling in Chris Olave's range of outcomes in this offense. But I do want to talk about the Bears. Luther Burden has been the buzzy name this week. Everybody on Twitter is talking about Luther Burden. I think a lot of that was because DJ Moore left the game last week in an ambulance, had to go to the hospital, and I think there was expectations that he wouldn't play. But we need to have the conversation, assuming Luther Burden's out there, Rome Odunze is healthy, Olamide Zaccheaus is out there. We see Colston Loveland now taking over Cole Kmet's role, but they're both involved as well. I just don't think there's enough to put Luther Burden in your lineup. And I understand, like, there's exciting per route run metrics and per target metrics. Well, that's because he's not running a lot of routes and he's not getting a lot of targets. I just don't see how that role expands given who they have on the team.
I would tend to agree. And we saw Rome Odunze. I know that production was lower, but he another guy that just missed delivering on what the expectation would be for where he has been running throughout this season. He's the clear number one wide receiver. And so he's the clear number one wide receiver. And even with DJ Moore in the lineup, they've not been intentional about getting the wide receiver 2 up and running within this offense. It's kind of, you've got just like we talked about Jacksonville, you've got the wide receiver 1, and then you've got some other pieces that can be contributors. But we know the explosive ability for Luther Burden. So you can't deny that it could be there. It's the old of like we're getting pumped up over a guy like 4 catches for 40, 50 yards. And it's kind of one of those of, it always cracks me up when we're getting like these young backup running backs. And we're like, oh, look, Blake Corum's getting involved. And you look at it, it's like 6 touches for 23 yards. And it's like, what are we doing here of like,
And that's just kind of what it comes down to Luther Burden. Like, I get it. He's a special talent and he's a very explosive player, but I think that he's still a developmental guy that isn't really ready for a full-time role yet. And like I said, people are so quick, like, look at his quarterback rating when he's targeted. Like, yeah, he's got 12 targets, and one of them was a 65-yard trick play on a flea flicker. And like, well, look at his, per route run metric. And it's like, yeah, he runs 8 routes a game. Like, of course, his numbers are going to be really good when like they're scheming up plays to get the ball to him. And like, yes, I think he's a good player. As a Bears fan, excited about his long-term impact. Worth a stash, absolutely, in most formats at this point. But I do want to pump the brakes on anybody like recommending that you put him in the lineup this week. I think it's still just a little bit too early for that. Miami Dolphins at Cleveland Browns.
Weather on. So we have not talked about weather, and we're talking about weather in this next game for sure. But I know that Chicago, there's a chance of some rain and some wind in that game. It's definitely not going to be as impactful as the Miami Cleveland game, but just probably, I guess maybe like holistically, when you have got a situation like that, how much do you allow that to weigh into your decisions?
Very, very tiny bit. I think like when we talk about the Cleveland game, and again, like forecasting weather 4 or 5 days in advance is a very imperfect science. Like, it could be a sunny, beautiful day by the time Sunday rolls around. So I don't want to put too much weight in it. Like, if I wake up on Sunday morning and it's pouring and there's 50, 60 mile an hour wind gusts, then I might adjust a little bit. But I believe it was Doug Drennan. We had this conversation a couple of years ago in Basecamp, our kind of internal messaging system at Football Guys. And there was a weather game coming up, and I think it was Doug. I hope I'm crediting the right person here, but somebody pulled historical numbers from these like very inclement games. And basically it's like, unless the wind is like 70 miles an hour, or unless the rain is just coming down in buckets, or if there's like 1.5 feet of snow, there's really no impact. So, I mean, like we oftentimes get so worked up about these games, and these athletes, like, they could still perform in 99% of conditions. So like, unless there's crazy wind gusts, like I'm trying to think of that game a few years ago where we saw them like warming up pregame, and like they'd throw football and it would go like 30 yards downfield and then stop and start coming backwards. Like, those types of games, I'll put a little bit of weight in it, but we'll wait to see what this looks like on Sunday before I react too much.
Yeah, that Patriots Bills game, I vividly
That's the one
remember.
I'm thinking
I
of.
think it was Mac Jones rookie year, and Josh Allen was like throwing the ball like it was nothing going on. But
yeah, he was just slicing through the wind.
Yeah.
I remember that one. Yeah, and that was the one, if I recall too, like so much of the advantage was who had the wind at their back. Like, it was like if you were playing into the wind, you literally could not drive the ball. So it was like, all right, let's just like, keep our head above water for this quarter until we get
Yeah.
the other side of the field, and then we'll try to score a couple of points. Yeah, I remember that game. So there are exceptions, and if this Cleveland game is that bad, we'll adjust, but we'll see. So Miami Dolphins, Cleveland Browns. Darren Waller got a rest limitation, but it doesn't seem like he's not going to be ready. It's hip/rest. He's been dealing with that hip thing since the preseason. Tua Tagovailoa left thumb, but practicing in full, so no concern there. Jerry Jeudy dealing with a knee injury, has been limited all week. And then David Njoku, who picked up that knee injury and left last week's game, has yet to practice. So, Jeff, what are the takeaways here? I mean, this is just kind of a dumpster fire between two organizations that are sitting at 1-5 right now. Feels like both of these coaches are on the hot seat. Both of these quarterbacks are on the hot seat. This could be one of those fun games with two teams that feel like they really have nothing to lose.
I mean, I know things are bad in Miami, but I'm reading your sheet here and they're 1-20, and gosh, that's really
I sent you the rough draft. I'm sorry, Jeff. I got this inputted into.
I just want to make sure you don't miss it
editor.
before you put it in.
No.
So
No, I've got all of the misspellings and everything polished. I accidentally sent you my rough draft. I'm sorry about that.
no worries at all. No, I think you're looking at. We started talking about trades with Joe Flacco getting traded from Cleveland, and that's really what this game is two teams that the Dolphins are in all the rumors right now with potentially Jalen Waddle, with Devin Achane being moved. Just looking at fire sale maybe in Miami, and Cleveland, we've already seen them move off Joe Flacco. David Njoku was a name that was mentioned as potential trade candidate, obviously now dealing with the knee injury. So that's kind of, you hit it. I mean, these are two teams, their season is all but over, and then whoever loses this game, it's pretty definitely over. So it's just two teams that sometimes you run into these matchups, but that doesn't mean we can't have fantasy goodness. When you look at but the weather might mean we can't have fantasy goodness. So this is probably one worth considering. I saw yesterday reports of 60-mile-per-hour gusts. I don't know.
Yep.
Not right now. I see 22 miles per hour on the weather forecast. But again, we already talked about weather. I think Judkins is the one to talk about here, going up against this Miami defense.
He's my RB3 on the week. Like, I've got Judkins ahead of Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs in my weekly rankings, which most people aren't, in a position where they're benching Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. This is more for us with the accuracy stuff that we do. But yeah, I'm taking the cheese on Quinjon Judkins, ranking him very aggressively this week.
Yeah, as you should be. We saw Vidal last week, Kamani Vidal for the Chargers have a big game. We saw Rico Dowdle 2 weeks ago. This Miami defense, it's 1-2-3 Cancun in Miami right now. So he's going to be the chalkiest play in DFS this week. Everybody's going to have Judkins in their lineup. He's priced at 6,000 on DraftKings. So that's going to happen, and we'll see how that works out. I think that should they be able to throw the ball at all, you're going to look at Harold Fannin in this matchup with David Njoku out, with where we haven't seen Dylan Gabriel be able to drive the ball outside of the numbers. And in most weeks, that's probably going to be a problem against this Miami defense. Might not be a problem. So you've got those two rookies, and that's really just the Browns in general, of the way that they've been moving is involving these rookies and just handing the reins over. I think Miami side, we saw Devin Achane get back rolling last week on the rush game that he had gotten shut down 2 weeks previously. And then, Waddle has come in and been the wide receiver one since Tyreek Hill went out. Darren Waller made his week with that late touchdown. It was a little bit hairy there for a minute before he got in.
8 scoreless yards before that touchdown. Yeah. Wasn't feeling great about everyone who was streaming him. Yeah.
Yeah, Malik Washington's role has not changed at all, really. He's just kind of 5 scheme targets per game. And so if you're desperate, he can get you there maybe in a PPR fill-in spot, but definitely not the explosion that we were hoping to see with Tyreek Hill out of the lineup. They've got Nick Westbrook-Akine is just, he's running wind sprints, and so he's staying active. He's on the field. But yeah, you're really narrowing down, and we've talked previously about just Waddle, Achane, Waller, basically.
Yeah, and I've got Harold Fannin, ranked as a tight end one, so getting him in lineups where I've got him this week because, short area of the field, like that's what you talk about, especially if it is a windy game. Jerry Jeudy, though, a guy who many drafted to be a wide receiver 2 or a wide receiver 3 on their fantasy teams, I've got him as a hard bench this week. I mean, outside of my top 50 wide receivers, and I realize there's some deep dynasty leagues out there where people are going to be desperate enough to get him in, but I want nothing to do with Jerry Jeudy. Well, Dylan Gabriel, and especially talking about the weather as well, like, he runs those deep routes downfield, and I just don't see how he connects with Dylan Gabriel in this matchup. Las Vegas Raiders at Kansas City Chiefs. We got an AFC West showdown in this early slate. Brock Bowers still not practicing with a knee injury. Jacoby Myers popped up on Thursday's injury report with an ankle. So we'll see. There's a lot of rumors right now going on about trades. Brashard Smith dealing with an illness, didn't practice Wednesday, but was back to a full participation on Thursday. Marquise Brown practicing in full. Xavier Worthy practicing in full. Rashee Rice practicing in full. We talk about this all the time. This is just what the Chiefs do. They put a bunch of guys on the injury report that have no business being on the injury report. But Brock Bowers out again, Jeff, and I think that's where we should start with here. Is Michael Mayer a viable streamer again last week? We saw him fall in the end zone last week. Or are we putting him back in lineups this week?
Contingent upside, Michael Mayer. That's what we've got. Yep. So, it's just the definition of contingent upside. We see Michael Mayer plug right in and I think he finished as a tight end one last week. I'm pretty certain he did, but he looked good.
It doesn't take much, 2 catches for a touchdown will get you into the top 12.
It was like 550 and a touchdown. That's going to get you in the top 12 most weeks. But yeah, I think that Mayer is definitely you're putting him into the lineup. And potential concern, just the Chiefs being a sharper defense and knowing that they can really kind of lock down maybe on Mayer. That'll be interesting to see.
And I just want to look, putting it into perspective. You're saying get him in your lineups. I've got him in the streaming discussion, which we talk about all the time, like tight end 8 through tight end 18.
He's a tight end 1 for me. So
all right, so top 12. I mean, I've got him 15, which is still close enough. Like, I'm not saying he's like a must start by any means, but I've got him ahead of Hunter Henry, ahead of AJ Barner, Evan Ingram, TJ Hawkinson, Kyle Pitts. So just kind of clustered in with all those other guys that you're putting in your lineup and praying they can score.
Well, now I'm worried about who I don't have in my top 12 because I've got him in front of those guys too, and he's still tight end 12 for me. But
I've got Taysom Hill, also going back to the
you are an aggressive Taysom Hill ranker historically.
I mean,
so I certainly understand that.
We saw this guy. He was like the tight end 15 last week on one touch, like a goal line carry, and I think that's why I always do it with Taysom
probably
Hill.
Zach Ertz with the Dallas matchup is probably somebody you've got up there too.
Zach Ertz, not just the Dallas matchup, but also the Washington pass catcher injuries. We'll get to that one in a little bit, and then Mason Taylor, Darren Waller, Harold Fannin, and then Cade Otton, of course, who we'll talk about later as well. So. I mean, like I said, you can kind of take all those guys, throw them in a cup, shake them up, and they're all the same.
Yeah, and I think the larger point is that outside of having some of these top end tight ends, you feel fine with streaming options, and you do put Mayer on the radar there as a streaming option.
Jacoby Myers dealing with this ankle injury right around the same time that some teams express interest in a trade. We're hearing Pittsburgh Steelers are interested, Patriots are interested, Bills are interested. My actionable advice here is pick up Trey Tucker. I don't know what it is. Like, I've become very infatuated with Trey Tucker this week. Like, I watched all of his film and I was like, this is not the same Trey Tucker we saw from the first 2 years of his career. And I can't stop thinking about the Doug Baldwin and the Tyler Lockett career trajectories where these guys were just riding the rail outside, running nothing but 9 routes for the first 2 years of their career, and then suddenly developing into these well-rounded receivers who are catching the ball across the middle of the field, creating after the catch. And Trey Tucker is starting to do that now. So I can't help but think about what those guys did in their careers. And I see Trey Tucker on a very similar trajectory under the same head coach.
Yeah, I think that Trey Tucker, if you are in a dynasty league, or even in most leagues, he seems like a great buy because it's just nobody's buying into it is a big part of it. He had the explosion week against the Commanders in week 3, so that's part of it as well. And so while you're seeing a guy that is currently a top 12 wide receiver, it's still getting written off, but he's been a consistent producer week after week. And the stories that, Geno Smith is very comfortable going to him. And even in Dynasty, should this trade happen with Jacoby Myers, you know exactly what's going to happen in Dynasty is everybody's going to say it's all Jack Besh, here we go, Jack Besh time.
Dante Thornton.
Dante Thornton a little bit, but yeah, and that's where I think it's really going to be they're open to trading Jacoby Myers, not because of what Jack Bech might be doing in practice, but because of what Trey Tucker is actually doing in games, and the comfort level of having Tucker, the comfort level of having Mayer, getting Brock Bowers plugged back in, utilizing Ashton Genty in the passing game. I mean, we're at 4 guys now, and so I don't know if Geno Smith right now currently is a guy that I want, the 5th guy on too much there. So, but that might be a potential sell window should you want to do that. If you drafted Jack Bech in the 2nd round and everybody's in, and certainly could end up wrong there. You can listen to our show last week and I was wrong about lots of things. So I'm sure that it might be another one, but I think
I'd be reasonably excited about Jack Bech if Jacoby Myers gets traded, because that to me probably would signal that Bech would become that full-time slot receiver, which we've seen him kind of forced to play out wide, which isn't really his bag. Like, they're trying to get him on the field, but it seems like he's a little bit out of position right now. So I'd be reasonably excited for Jack Bech if Jacoby Myers gets traded, but I think Trey Tucker is the one that would fly under the radar and would be the biggest beneficiary.
Yeah, I think Bech still gets kind of stuck in how much are you going to play two tight ends when you have Brock Bowers back? And that's the assumption of Brock Bowers being back healthy somewhat in a recent window. And so I think that's the other conversation with Mayer of how much has he unlocked with this 2 tight ends being their base personnel. And that would be, as we see him perform in this spot, you're more comfortable with him. He's more comfortable, and he can be a primary spot there. And if you're going to have, it's going to be between Dante Thornton and Bech there on who's going to be the wide receiver 2 outside in those 2 wide receiver formations, because Trey Tucker's not going anywhere. He's not going off the field. But again, just like you said to start, Trey Tucker, I think, is the one that I'm really interested in.
So let's talk about the Chiefs here. And this is the first time, we've been waiting to see this for a year and a half now, that we're finally going to see Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Hollywood Brown all on the field together. And I wrote like a big 8,000 word think piece on this last offseason, and then it never came to fruition. So maybe I'll reshare that article right now. But this is like 3 versatile receivers. And we've talked about this a little bit, and we've talked about it because of the deep dive article that I did last year. But like, receivers under Andy Reid have been so pigeonholed into doing one thing. You're either the underneath guy or the deep guy. And now we've got 3 guys that can kind of do it all. Like we saw last year before the injury, Rashee Rice was starting to run downfield in addition to doing the underneath stuff. We know Xavier Worthy has both of those skill sets. We saw him like the deep guy in the early part of the season, and then the underneath guy in the second part of the season. And then Hollywood Brown throughout his entire career, he's been able to win at every level of the field as well. So we have already seen without Rashee Rice, this Chiefs offense is back to humming. They're back to the explosive plays. They're back to looking like the Chiefs. And now you inject one of the best wide receivers in the league into this offense. I mean, I don't know how much more excited you could be about Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs than we already are. But I mean, this is just like a fire all cannons. Like, I'm trying to get Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy, of course, in my lineup. I've still got Marquise Brown as kind of a high-end wide receiver 4. Travis Kelce always has the risk of getting in the end zone. And I also think that having all of these receivers opens up the run game for him a bit as well, too. So I'm just really excited to see what this Chiefs offense is going to look like.
And it's really interesting. And maybe it's just a force of the personnel that they've had available. But Noah Gray, since week 2, 65% snaps, 68% snaps, 56, 75% snaps. Mm-hmm. And so he's kind of trending almost exactly like Travis Kelce in similar participation. So how much of it, some of that's maybe being a little bit more proactive with getting Travis Kelce rest reps. He's not playing 100% of snaps. He's playing about 75% or so. And so some of that's fitting in there. And some of that's, I guess my thought is how much remains with Hollywood Brown. And I think that Hollywood Brown, we saw last week, the 2 touchdowns. That's kind of what you're probably thinking there with Brown of, he could score at any week because Patrick Mahomes is playing at a level now, again, where guys can score any week. And as much as the talk about Rice, and it's important to note that this isn't an injury that Rice is coming back from. He's been active going. He's at full 100% health. So like
he's been a full go since OTAs.
So I don't expect any ramp up period. I expect them to treat Rashee Rice like they would treat Rashee Rice. And to me, like Hollywood Brown would have to be like kind of desperation to get him in my lineup.
I said wide receiver 4 is where I've got him. Yeah. But I think the upside is there, that you're getting a lot more, like, the upside for Marquise Brown is a lot higher than a lot of the other guys I have in that same area, which Christian Kirk, Travis Hunter, Jalen Coker, Jerry Jeudy. Like, I'd argue that Marquise Brown has upside that a lot of those guys probably don't.
Yeah, and I think that the Chiefs are showing themselves to be an offense that you want pieces of, and you're getting Patrick Mahomes delivering as paying back to elite fantasy asset at quarterback, and he's running like he's never run in his career. I think I did the numbers this week.
Second in the league behind only Justin Fields in rushing yards.
He's basically on pace to double his career high in rushing yardage.
I know.
So that tells you kind of, and you wonder if some of that's sustainable or not, but it does remind me a little bit of Baker Mayfield last year, where you can argue, like, is this sustainable? But it's sustainable because he's reading what the defense is giving him and just taking off and going. And that's where you're kind of, it's almost that cat and mouse game where, and I think that he's realized it, because if you've got the defenses like sitting up, or they're trying to push the ball down the field again. And that's the biggest thing, that they're trying to push the ball down the field again. If you're kind of dumping it off in the short game, like, it's really hard to have your receivers downfield while you're also dumping it off in the short game. So as playing that cat and mouse game, you're sending your receivers flooding the deep area of the field. Now you start to run. So the defenders are thinking of like, well, Mahomes is going to run on this. Like, I need to be in position to be able to stop that. And then that's when you start to open up the breakdowns downfield. And so I think that that's what's happening with him running, of instead of having a short outlet, they basically said, take off and run here, Patrick. And then the defenses are going to start to adjust to that. And that's going to open up the downfield shots. It's really, really exciting. But I think more to that point, like I was starting on saying that this Chiefs offense is one that you want pieces of. I think Isaiah Pacheco is the entry point into this offense. Of if you missed the boat, and people have been trying to trade for Rashee Rice for the last 2 weeks. Nobody's trading you Rashee Rice. I think Pacheco is the entry point, because you're starting to see usage in that backfield shift towards him being more the it's far away off from bell cow back, but definitely the lead back. I mean, the hesitation on that being Kareem Hunt still getting the opportunities in high leverage goal line situations. But I think it could be there and unlock in the second half of the year, because Pacheco has just been the most explosive back, and he's started to look really, really good and really comfortable again. And you're going to get to a point, I would have to believe, where they kind of cut out the goal line stuff with Hunt and they just leave Pacheco in there as the back.
And I've got Pacheco, I think, higher than I've probably had him all season in my weekly rankings, which isn't very high, but running back 21. So, I've got him same group as like we talked about with Alvin Kamara earlier, and bunched in with like Travis Etienne, who's got a tough matchup going overseas. So yeah, definitely trying to get Isaiah Pacheco in my lineups where I can, and does make for one of those kind of, we talk about it all the time, like a good buy low option in fantasy should make you feel a little bit gross. And I feel like you'd probably feel a little bit gross making an offer for Isaiah Pacheco, but that's why he is a buy low candidate. Philadelphia Eagles at Minnesota Vikings. All of the fantasy relevant players that we care about for the Eagles are healthy. Love to see that. Carson Wentz, dealing with a shoulder injury, has been practicing in full. And then JJ McCarthy, dealing with an ankle injury, has been limited. So it seems like, I think I might have that wrong. I might have had a typo. I'm pulling up the injury report right now. No, that was right. Carson Wentz is practicing in full. So seems like we're trending towards another potential Carson Wentz start here. But Kevin O'Connell, I don't know if you saw, they've asked him about it a few times in press conferences, and he seems to get pretty agitated with the who is going to start questions. So, I was very willing to just brush off the, that they were making a bigger deal of JJ McCarthy's ankle than it actually was, and that they were trying to rest him up. But based on Kevin O'Connell's comments this week, I'm wondering if maybe there is some truth to that. Like, just wanting to keep him on the bench, letting him reset a little bit, and just letting Carson Wentz kind of run with the ship for the next couple of weeks. So we'll see how this pans out, but trending towards another potential Carson Wentz start here.
As we should, with the Philadelphia Eagles coming to town, just the narrative through street. We need to get Carson Wentz this start here against his former team, against the quarterback that knocked him out of there. Carson Wentz was headed towards being the NFL MVP, was injured, and next thing you know, Carson Wentz is out on the street, and now he's found his way to the Vikings into this matchup. And I think for fantasy purposes, from what we've seen so far, the upside seems to be higher with Wentz right now until we do see it with McCarthy. So that's a consideration. That's what we want to see. We want to see a fantasy shootout in this game. Starting with the Eagles side, looking at mean, AJ Brown is probably the big question that's still going to remain to be the big question. And it's a situation where I thought it was interesting after the game because there was the reports of the hours-long meeting between him, Saquon Barkley, and Jalen Hurts. And Saquon and Jalen said, yeah, we had the meeting. And AJ said, we didn't have a meeting. What are you talking about? And now trade rumors have been out there for every single wide receiver in the NFL, it seems like. But it's almost, I'm wondering if the Eagles, you look at a situation, so we're seeing Jalen Waddle on the block. And so he was a teammate at Alabama with Devontae Smith and with Jalen Hurts. Part of me wonders if we might get like the old NBA of like, hey, maybe we'll trade AJ Brown out. We'll bring Jalen Waddle into this spot, and Jalen Waddle will be happy to be here with Devonta and Jalen Hurts, and we'll get whatever picks you were going to get for Waddle. You can get him for AJ Brown. That to me makes some level of sense. I don't know if the Eagles' mind would be there or not.
Yeah, I do wonder, and I feel like there's a, right now I feel like there's a very nice complementary skill set between what AJ Brown does and what Devonta Smith does, and I think Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith do a lot of the same things. Like, not that that's ever like a bad problem to have, but I do think that they like the team that they've constructed in Philadelphia. But yeah, something's weird there, and we just keep getting these like little breadcrumbs over the last couple of years where it just seems like Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown hate each other, but like they're also so successful and this team is so good that they're like willing to deal with it. But like there is some very strange animosity between these two. So yeah, we'll see how this one goes. I don't think there's a ton to talk about from a fantasy perspective, really. Like we know, like you talk about clean and dirty offenses all the time, Jeff. Like these are the two cleanest offenses in the league. Like you know who the touches are going to. Dallas Goedert's been heating up. Dallas Goedert's going to get his. AJ Brown's going to get his. Saquon Barkley's going to get his. Devonta Smith always has the boom bust potential. And then with the Vikings, we're firing up Jordan Mason, even though it's a tough matchup. Justin Jefferson is a plug and play wide receiver 1. Jordan Addison is a plug and play wide receiver 2. And then TJ Hawkinson, you're hoping he falls into the end zone. And I think that's kind of it, right?
Yeah, one of my favorite social media posts that I'll see will be when you have like the wild, like the consensus take, but somebody thinks that they're saying something. And like I was seeing it this week of like, we really got to consider Dallas Goedert as a tight end 1 like the rest of this season. And it's just like, welcome to September 15th, buddy. Like yes, we do. Off of like 9 catches and 110 yards on primetime spot. Yes, absolutely. We do need to consider Dallas Goedert as a tight end 1 this year. And the conversation is really a top 5 tight end play for Dallas Goedert.
That's where I've got him this week.
Yeah. And so Kevin Patullo coming in, and sometimes we see this with coordinators where, we were kind of hoping this offseason that we would see it with Jameson Williams, with new coordinators coming in, right, looking at their pieces and utilizing them in a different way than they have been previously, because we knew Goddard was a good player. It was just always Devonta and AJ were going to get theirs. If Goddard is out there, maybe he catches a touchdown, but if one of them guys are out of the lineup, then it's wheels up for Dallas Goedert. Now it's just shifted to where it's always wheels up for Dallas Goedert, and maybe one of those 2 wide receivers will catch a touchdown.
And again, this just comes down to like, this article that I wrote earlier in the week, and it's something that we've talked about a lot this offseason, is just like the way that defenses have shifted to too high shell coverage. Like we saw what a lot of teams did is start doing this kind of dink and dunk approach, which was the way that you beat that shell coverage. But like, why do you want to dink and dunk to a 160-pound receiver when you've got these 270-pound tight ends out there? Like it just makes sense. Like the natural progression of how to throw a counterpunch to this shell coverage is 12 personnel and getting the tight ends heavily involved. And we see like last year, not one team ran 12 personnel at higher than a 35% clip. This year, we've got 8 teams that are running 12 personnel at higher than a 35% clip. It's starting to become base personnel for a lot of teams out here, and the Eagles are one of those teams. Like we see a lot of Grant Calcaterra and like these other tight ends getting involved as well. And there were so many preseason reports. We kind of joked about it when we were doing our preseason training camp article or episodes. Every single week, one of the bullet points was like, Dallas Goedert looks unbelievable and has been a focal point of the offense. And we were so willing to just brush it off. And we're just like, Dallas Goedert is not going to be the focal point in an offense with Saquon Barkley, AJ Brown, and Devonta Smith. But here we are through a month and a half, and he has been. So I don't think this is a fluke. I think this is just how the Eagles want to start beating these teams in the short areas of the field right up the seam. Anything else on this game, Jeff?
Yeah, I think you're a great point on Dallas, and he's been hurt too, and he's healthy this year.
Yeah,
and I think that we need to consider that as well. We're seeing it Dalton Kincaid in Buffalo, of like these guys that have played through injury. It's really tough to be productive out of injury. I think you're exactly right on the Minnesota point, though, of like, who's going to be touching the ball. We haven't really seen it with TJ Hawkinson, and that's another player that's been injured and not been able to put it together. Saw Jordan Addison really start to get reacclimated into the offense and come through with the game winner after he went disappearing in London. So you've got that, I think, going on. You've got just explosive upside. You want pieces in this game.
Imagine how good Jordan Addison would be if he just stopped getting in his own way. Carolina Panthers at New York Jets. We got Jalen Coker back at practice in a full capacity. Love to see that. He'll be back out there again. Chuba Hubbard is dealing with his calf injury, has been limited in practice. But, Jeff, he broke the huddle. I don't know if you saw that. Broke the huddle after practice. So people are very excited about that. Jatavian Sanders, limited on Wednesday, full participant on Thursday. And then for the Jets, of course, Garrett Wilson not practicing with a knee injury. They said that he's probably going to miss a handful of weeks. Josh Reynolds dealing with a hip injury, didn't practice Wednesday, but was limited on Thursday. So I think there's a lot to discuss here with the Panthers because we got Jalen Coker getting plugged back into this offense. We expect him to immediately be a full-time player. Sounds like he probably could have returned earlier, but they just wanted to make sure he was 100%, opens up the week practicing in full. So we love to see that. Is he somebody you're putting in your lineups, Jeff, or do you want to take a wait and see approach? I think the major takeaway that I am looking at right now is that I'm moving Tetairoa McMillan even higher up in my weekly rankings because I think this benefits him. But I think Jalen Coker is kind of that like break glass in case of emergency wide receiver 4.
Are they going to need to even throw the ball in this game like that? I mean, start with the.
Yeah, potentially. I also forgot though, I did say like that they're going to, Tetairoa McMillan could benefit. Tetairoa McMillan's also getting the Sauce Gardner treatment, which I forgot about. So, we keep talking about that same cluster, Marquise Brown, Sterling Shepard, Jerry Jeudy, that kind of bunch. That's where I've got Jalen Coker, which is like, you're putting him in if you're really, really desperate, but don't feel great about it.
I think my biggest concern right now with opponents playing the Jets, and especially with the Panthers, is the exact type of opponent where the Panthers would love nothing more than to run the ball 45 times every game is what they would love to do. And we saw last week, Denver has really, Denver, we know that they can have some explosive weeks offensively. And they basically just shut it down and laughed at the Jets and said, you guys aren't beating us. Like as long as we don't beat ourselves, you're not beating us. I can't help but wonder if the Panthers didn't digest that game film and see, let's just roll with these running backs. We got Rico Dowdle, we got Chuba Hubbard. We can just jam it down their throat and kill the clock. And Justin Fields is not going to beat us without Garrett Wilson in the lineup, or even with Garrett Wilson in the lineup. That's my primary concern, just for the offensive environment for the Panthers. I mean, we saw the breakout game from Tetairoa McMillan last week, 2 touchdowns, but he had 3 catches in the game. So like that's where, red zone usage absolutely for McMillan, but it's a big volume game from the passing game for the Panthers. I don't expect that.
So we talked about it earlier in the week too. You and I are kind of in the Rico Dowdle camp, but I see a lot of people like very excited because Chuba Hubbard still has that C on his chest and is breaking down the huddle. And it's got me, all of the reports we're hearing about Chuba Hubbard still being a leader on the team and all that sort of stuff does have me maybe second guessing where we had really entrenched ourselves in on Rico Dowdle. But that being said, like I'm still ranking it as if Rico Dowdle is going to be the guy. And I expect Chuba Hubbard to be somewhat involved, but I just don't see how Rico Dowdle can do what he's done over the last couple of weeks. Just the second time in Bryce Young's career that he's won back-to-back games. I feel like the cat is out of the bag here, and I've got Rico Dowdle as a high-end RB2, and I'm looking at Chuba Hubbard as more of a low-end RB3.
It's our friend Chris
on this one.
What can you live with? What can you live with in your life? So what can you live with if you're sitting there on Sunday night and you're losing by 7 points and Rico Dowdle goes for 200 yards and you benched him because you played Ramondre Stevenson, who got 7 points, and that's what can you live with? And I think that's just more my conversation of like, where are you ranking Rico Dowdle this week? It's more, if I have Rico Dowdle and I have seen him be one of the most productive 2-game runs in NFL history, it needs to be something significant to completely pull him out of a lineup where, if especially like a dynasty league where you're starting 10 spots, or even you've got 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and a flex, like I need to have a real reason if I'm not going to go back to the Rico Dowdle well. And I think that that's more my conversation point on this of, I need a real reason. And I'm getting like questions on Devin Echan or Rico Dowdle. Like, okay, like I understand the matchup and the weather, but like, I'm still probably going to go down with the Achane ship over like playing Dowdle. It's not I believe that Rico Dowdle is a top 10 play until he's not a top 10 play. It's more, I have seen this guy be fantastic the last 2 weeks. I need a reason to not put that into my fantasy lineup. And so that's my conversation point on Rico Dowdle. Whereas I can exercise a little bit more caution on Chuba Hubbard. I think it's a lot less. It's like people are getting lost in the conversation about like, you must break it down to how is it going to be 60-40? What is the numbers projected to be at? I don't care about the projection right now. I care about a guy that has been fantastic every single game that he has played over the last, I think we're talking about going 11 games now at this point. It's like a 2,000-yard pace over 11 games as the primary running back.
All right, Jeff, I'm going to name a few guys that I have ranked ahead, or I'm sorry, a few guys that I have Rico Dowdle ranked ahead of this week, and you can let me know if I am just absolutely crazy for these or not. Cam Scattaboo on the road against Denver. Is it crazy to have Rico Dowdle ahead of him?
I don't think it's crazy to have Rico Dowdle ahead of them. I'm right there on Scattaboo being 14 and Dowdle being 15.
All right, so I'm guessing we've got a lot of the same ones then. Ashton Jinzy on the road against Kansas City. That's a tough matchup. Rashad White on the road against Detroit. That's a tough matchup. These are some of the guys that I have Rico Dowdle ahead of, and maybe it is crazy. I don't know.
I mean, I'm playing White. We know what that backfield should look like, and I understand tough matchup, but again, that should be back and forth game that I definitely do want pieces of. We've seen White be involved in the passing game. Do we seen Genty be involved in the passing game since they made that shift to Raheem Mostert being the running back 2 and benching Zamir White, benching Dylan Lobby? It's all been Genty in the passing game. So I think Genty can still get you there, even in a tough matchup. There is some level of both of those guys do have ceiling. And so I think that's, Rashad White, should a shootout occur against Detroit and White finds the end zone 2 or 3 times, I don't think that's out of the question. I think even against a tough matchup, we know Genty's got the ability to break big plays or the ability to find his way to 5 or 6 receptions. I mean, those types of things are, I understand the thought process for putting Dowdle ahead of there. I think it's more just like big braining the whole thing. Like, we're coming off a game that I feel like everybody big brained on, like T Higgins and like these things. And I think that's some of it as well. Like, people were big braining Jaylen Warren going up against a Bengals defense that's just gotten roasted. So if you give somebody the ability to out analyze and outthink something, they're going to do it. I think that's kind of more my point on Dowdle.
So last question I have for you, rankings related, and this is going to be about the quarterbacks, Justin Fields, because I have seen him ranked all over the place from different outlets this week. Where do you have Justin Fields this week?
Right now, I have Justin Fields as quarterback 11.
All and,
right. We don't have Josh Allen. We don't have Lamar Jackson this week. So I would have him outside of being a quarterback 1. Should we have all the pieces? More of it is, I mean, I think you can make the conversation for Bo Nix should be probably ahead of him, but we did see Denver shut it down a little bit offensively. I mean, Jackson Dart's an interesting conversation, but again, that's the other side of that game, going up against Denver defense that did what they did to Justin Fields. In Carolina's defense, the run defense has been kind of low-key good. I think that's the other part of it, that they've been pretty solid on the run defense. So I understand every single level of concern with Justin Fields.
See, this is where we're going to have a little bit of a dissension. I am really aggressively ranking Justin Fields. And I know coming off of a bad game, it's not great, but Carolina is bottom 10 in EPA per play. Carolina Panthers are favorites in this game. And this feels like one of your classic Justin Fields hot dog games where, we're looking at 2.3 fantasy points at the end of the third quarter. And we're saying, like, what was I thinking playing Justin Fields this week? And then you just go for a walk because you're mad at yourself. And then you come back and you check your app and it's like, oh, Justin Fields put up 36 points. I am very aggressive on my Justin Fields, like, especially because some of the other guys have tough matchups. Jalen Hurts going up against Minnesota, Drake May against Tennessee, Baker Mayfield against Detroit. So I've got Justin Fields as my QB4 on the week. And that's probably going to look foolish when the week is said and done, but just such a good matchup. And these seem like the ones where Justin Fields does really well when they are underdogs going against not great defenses. So I'm firing Justin Fields up in a lot of leagues, but I do understand the concern after what we saw last week. Last game in the early slate, New England Patriots at Tennessee Titans. Stephon Diggs limited with a chest injury. Calvin Ridley not practicing with a hamstring. And then Tyler Lockett getting a rest day. Nothing serious there. So, Jeff, what are we making of these wide receivers? We saw Kayshon Boutte get 2 touchdowns last week. We saw Demario Douglas with a big touchdown. Stephon Diggs was kind of phased out after back-to-back big games. Is this just going to be like a very frustrating rotation of receivers, never knowing who's going to hit on a weekly basis?
Yeah, I started putting into my Fantasy Fix article last week, Narrative Street into my Fantasy Fix article, and I completely missed the Kayshon Boutte narrative of, he grew up down the road 2 hours away from the Superdome and getting to play in New Orleans and being an LSU player like that. That meant a lot to Boutte, and I think that Mike Vrabel is the type of coach that does a good job of recognizing those types of things. So, it's going to mean something for Kayshon to have a big game in this outing. And I think the bigger part of it is just the play of Drake May has been so good that it allows these other pieces to have big games. And that's where I go.
Mike Vrabel going back to Tennessee in your narrative street this week?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And so that's where I'm definitely not telling somebody to play Justin Fields over Drake May this week. I mean, Drake May has been, since week 2, he's been the quarterback 3 in fantasy. He's been ultra hot. This team is running very hot. And the Titans, you look at this matchup, Titans have been, you look at the numbers, they've been pretty solid against quarterbacks because there's like no threat. There's no reason.
I was frustrated. This just popped into my head yesterday. I forget who it was. I think it was the Panthers. They were like ranked number 1 against quarterbacks last year. Maybe it wasn't the Panthers, but there was a team that was like one of the worst defenses in the league that ranked number 1 against quarterbacks because they were just like, every team was up 4 scores by halftime, and then they would just run the ball out in the second half. And I feel like that's kind of what we're getting this year with Tennessee. Like, they aren't really good against quarterbacks. It's just that, like, quarterbacks haven't had to do too much against them.
It's one of those spots that, I think that for the most part, there's a coaching fraternity and they kind of do a good job of taking care of each other. Like, somebody's not going to be hanging 50 on like, for the most part, I feel like you don't see that too often. This feels like one where the Patriots, if they can put up 49 on the Titans, they are not going to have a problem putting up 49 points on the Titans. Is my read on it, and I think just
I just looked it up, by the way. It was the Dolphins last year. The Dolphins averaged 11 points per game to fantasy quarterbacks, not because they were a good defense, but just because quarterbacks didn't have to do much against them.
Yeah, the Cowboys defense. I think if you were to look at the Cowboys defense before that Dowdle explosion last week,
they were great against running backs.
They were great against running backs because like your safety's not covering anybody. We'll just throw it over your top for 65 yards. Like, why do we need
on the rare occasion a running back would get a run? They would just gash him for 8 yards, but it's just like, why take 8 yards on the ground when we can get 25 through the air?
Exactly. Yeah, but I think it's just on the Diggs point. It's more we have seen the big games, so we know the potential is there for the big games. We're seeing the level that Drake May is playing at. And so it's the position of like, don't overthink it. Don't stress too much about how many snaps Diggs is playing. Don't stress about for the most part in your lineup decisions, the ceiling is there for Diggs to go for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, given the environment that we see him in. And sometimes it's just going to miss. And you kind of have to live with it at some level. This isn't top 12 wide receiver Stephon Diggs in Buffalo. He's going to get a guaranteed 9 targets per game. This is, sometimes we can plug him in, sometimes we don't have to. And the other part worth considering too is we saw that low game last week. There was a lot of questionable offensive pass interference calls in that game. I know Bill Simmons is a noted Patriots fan, but so there's level of salt in it. But after the game, he was talking about he was like, if there was ever an NFL game that felt rigged, like the Saints Patriots game felt rigged, of how there would be a big play and there would be a PI on offense multiple times. I think it was something like 120 yards erased on offensive pass interference penalties.
Can I throw some numbers at you that might make you a little bit more excited about Stephon Diggs? Because what we've seen so far this year is that he's been in a limited role. Like, that's the only thing that's really impeded his production so far. He's only playing 65% of the snaps. That ranks 75th among wide receivers. But when he's on the field, and again, talking about per route stuff here, and I think this is a little bit different than the us just brushing off the Luther Burden per route stuff. Diggs has been on the field a little bit more than that. Right now, he is pulling a target on 33% of his routes. JSN and Puka Nacua are the only wide receivers averaging more targets on a per route run basis. And then he's averaging 3.26 yards per route run, which is second in the league behind only JSN. So I'd imagine that if we see that 65% route participation grow a little bit, we'll probably shave a little bit off the efficiency. But right now, when he is on the field and when he's running routes, he is arguably one of the most efficient wide receivers in the league. So I do wonder if this 65% route participation, I don't think that's going to maintain through the entire season. I think that's him 31 years old, coming off an ACL tear, getting ramped up a little bit. If we can see him grow to an 80-90% route participation, even shaving a little bit of that efficiency off, I still think that there is potential top 12 upside for Diggs in this offense.
Oh yeah, absolutely there is. And the other part of that too, if you were to look historically at what he was playing in Buffalo, he was like a 75% snap player because he does not care about blocking in the run game at all.
Right.
He doesn't. And the Bills were pulling him off on run situations, and you better believe the Patriots care about their receivers run blocking. So some of that's, it's a pitch count, but it's a pitch count on he's not playing the run blocking plays. So basically, because he never has played the run.
And that's when he comes off the field and Mac Hollins comes on the field because Mac Hollins is going to just sit there as kind of like a tight end that lines up out wide, essentially. But it's funny that we talk about Stephon Diggs, this guy who's been like a superstar for the last few years, and you could care less that he's gone, but you're like, oh, Mac Hollins, we miss you, come home. Let's get to the afternoon games here. New York Giants and Denver Broncos.
Titans real quick. I think I just want to see the backfield, how that continues to trend. Is it going to continue to trend towards, it was like 60-40 Tajay Spears taking the snaps last week. How does that keep trending? Was that only a product of them being down against the Raiders? Are they down in this game? Does that trend that direction? And then Calvin Ridley, I'm not counting him to be in this game. Van Jefferson was the player that rose up. I don't know. If you're playing a Titans pass catcher with Calvin Ridley, if you're playing Ao Manor, maybe if you're desperate, other than that, I would not be playing a Titans pass catcher.
Yeah, I am with you as well. So late afternoon games. Sorry, I just got a text message that distracted me a little bit. I need to do better about going DND before I start recording these shows. Joey Wright trolling me a little bit and really threw a loop into my headspace. New York Giants at Denver Broncos in the late afternoon slate. Darius Slayton did not practice with a hamstring injury. All of the Broncos players are healthy. So, Jeff, what is it that you're going to be looking for in this game? I think the big storyline is that we've seen Jackson Dart 2-0 at home, 1-0 on the road, with that loss coming to the Saints, like not a good team. So you almost wonder like how much of their mojo and moxie right now is just them feeding off of that really excited home crowd, them going on the road against one of the best defenses in the league. We've also got to deal with the elevation in Denver. This does feel like we can kind of maybe see the hype train slow down a little bit for the Giants.
Yeah, I tend to write the Saints game up as it's just you've got a really young core with Dart, with Scadabo, and sometimes they probably need to learn that they're no longer in college. They don't have the the paycheck game that you guys can just kind of blow off and beat by 40, no problem. And I would kind of wonder how much of that played into losing to that Saints team. We had a winless Saints team, and I think part of it too was the Saints have been pretty solid even though they've been losing. We saw them just push the Patriots last week, and I think they looked at it as this is our opportunity to get a win. We cannot miss this because we do not want to go to 0-5 at the time. This is our chance with the Giants coming down here. We have to win this game. And the Giants kind of feeling like, oh, we got it in the bag. We're rolling now with Cam and Scat, and we're ready to go. So I think that kind of happened in that game. But I think Denver, they know the challenge that they're walking into. This is a Broncos team that's 4-2, could easily be 6-0. And those games going back and forth early in the season, they've really started to roll there. I think there's some fun narrative through streets on this one, having Evan Ingram going up against the Giants, having Lil Jordan Humphrey going up against the Broncos, Russell Wilson sitting on the bench against the Broncos. So those are some fun things to unpack it's really on the Giants side of how can they continue to keep this rolling against a difficult defense. Can Dart get there? It's 50, 60 rushing yards, hits one touchdown, and you're kind of like gets to back end quarterback one-ish territory is where the conversation
Exactly where I've got
Dart.
him ranked. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
my QB 12, and same with Scadaboo. Like I've got him as a like my QB or my RB 13. So like both of these guys, I'm saying to start, but I also like could see the potential for like why did I do that? Like what was I thinking starting these rookies on a bad team on the road against Denver? I feel like we've seen enough over the last 3 weeks that you need to put him in your lineup, but I think there's very obvious risk as well.
Yeah, and Scadabo's he's been I think it's running back 5 since week 2. And
Yeah.
so and that's not just the product of a 3 touchdown game last week. That is being involved all over the field, getting there in he's pacing. I think I counted it up to about 1,100 rushing yards and about close to 500 receiving yards. Like those are big boy numbers that to be putting up there out of the backfield. So, I mean, you've got that. I think that's the biggest thing to watch against a difficult Denver defense.
Indianapolis Colts against the Los Angeles Chargers. Josh Downs dealing with a concussion, hasn't practiced this week. Ashton Doolin dealing with a chest injury, hasn't practiced this week. Alec Pierce is practicing in full, but he's on the injury report with an ankle. So we'll talk about those injuries, but also want to talk about Keenan Allen. He got a rest day on Wednesday. No concern that he won't be ready to go. And then Quentin Johnson back at practice in a limited capacity. Sounds like he might be willing to play this week, but we'll have to see what he's able to do on Friday first. But Jeff really banged up pass catching core here for the Colts. We've got Josh Downs not practicing, Ashton Doolin not practicing. Alec Pierce should be out there, but if Josh Downs can't play, they don't really have another guy that can play in the slot. To me, that just says that we're going to see even more touches going Tyler Warren's way, who has just been fantastic so far through the first month and a half of the season.
Yeah, that it's all Tyler Warren. You talk about banged up pass catchers. As long as Tyler Warren is healthy, they're not too banged up on their pass catchers. We saw Mo Alley Cox play a lot more snaps last week, a lot more 2 tight end sets last week. I would imagine that's the direction that they would want to go in this matchup. Should the wide receivers miss and be out, Adonai Mitchell will be an interesting one because he kind of got benched. I think he was a healthy scratch. I'm not saying in terms of fantasy. I'm just saying in terms of like, can he get like just involved again on the field again?
And I don't think he can with Alec Pierce. I think it's only like I think it's very contingent, like we were talking about with Michael Mayer. Like if Brock Bowers is out, Michael Mayer's in there. And I think Alec Pierce, if he's out there, that just completely boxes out Adonai Mitchell from doing much of anything. So, and that's the thing. I think he's very kind of pigeonholed into that outside the numbers, playing out wide sort of receiver. So even with Josh Downs not in the mix, I don't know if that opens up an opportunity for Adonai Mitchell. I could have the wrong read on this, but that's kind of how I've been thinking about it.
No, I don't. I'm not saying open up opportunity. Like just him being allowed to play again.
Yeah, that would be nice. That's step one is like getting out of the doghouse.
Yeah. And so I'm looking up here. I wanted to see, I mean, they're comfortable putting Michael Pittman Jr. in the slot. So
100%,
that could be the direction that they go of where they're so limited, and having the two, both Pierce and Mitchell can obviously win downfield vertically. And so I think that in this matchup, particularly, you would look to try to stress the Chargers on the outside with those two guys. It's really just decoys, probably to open up space inside for Tyler Warren, for Michael Pittman, having Mo Alley Cox playing there to rely on the run game on Jonathan Taylor, who's been off to a fantastic start.
Kamani Vidal, I'm ranking him as
I have a stat for Jonathan Taylor, by the way. So Jonathan Taylor, I have a stat for Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is the only back through the first 6 games this year to be over 600 rushing yards. Last year, through the first 6 games, we had 4 running backs over 600 rushing yards through their first 6 games, because Joe Mixon's included in that samples. He had it over his first 6 games. Jordan Mason, Saquon Barkley, and then I wish I had I'm blanking on who the 4th one was, but there was another one, if you remember, of somebody that had a lot of yards to start the year.
Was it Chuba? Because I remember Chuba being like a surprise. No. All right. Well, anyway, let's talk about Kamani Vidal real quickly. I've got him as a high-end RB3. I've got Hassan Haskins as don't even touch unless you are super, super, super desperate. And I think a lot of people are going to see the workload from last week and, get really excited about it. I don't want to big brain this, because we do this from time to time, Jeff, where we think too much. Sometimes it's as simple as hey, this running back's getting a lot of touches, get him in your lineup. But that interior offensive line last week was just absolutely bullying the Miami defense, and it just made Kamani Vidal's job really easy. Like so many of his yards came before contact, where he wasn't doing much of anything besides running through these wide open lanes. It is worth noting Joe Alt is back at practice, so if Joe Alt's back at practice, that's good news for Kamani Vidal. But this is a much better Indianapolis defense. They've got a really strong front seven. So I think the workload is there, and you're looking at a volume-based play for Kamani Vidal, but I much lower expectations against the Colts than we had for him last week against the Dolphins.
Yeah, but at the same time, we saw Omarion Hampton. He's not Omarion Hampton, but we did see Omarion Hampton. I think you can feel comfortable putting Vidal into your lineup. And I think when you break it down, I mean, I was wrong with the backfield split last week. And really, sometimes players become so valuable in other roles that it's difficult to put them into an offensive role. And I think that for Hassan Haskins become like all around just value special teams, core special teamer. And so if he's in a special teams meeting, is he in an offensive meeting? Like what's going on here? And also you don't want to lose that guy out of like those other positions. So you're more comfortable plugging Vidal into a heavy volume role in an offense that has operated with a heavy volume role out of their running backs. So I think volume's there to feel comfortable on playing Vidal, but I mean, certainly he's not playing Miami this week. So the idea that he's going to run for 120 yards again, I should have my betting app open and just bet 120 yards now because I'm saying that he's not going to do it, but I think you can play him.
And we could throw some like context here and like make it a little bit more actionable. I'm saying that like I'm tempering expectations for Kamani Vidal, but when I look at him in my lineups, there's a lot of guys that I do have him ranked ahead of that you would probably want to get into your lineups. I've got him ahead of Ken Walker. I've got him ahead of Travion Henderson, Zach Charbonnet, Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, Woody Marks. So, I mean, like I'm saying that I'm tempering expectations, but I also prefer him ahead of a lot of those guys that are in split backfields that you probably did draft to be plug and play starters. Like, I don't think you want to bench Kenneth Walker, but if you drafted Kenneth Walker and you picked up Kamani Vidal, I think that's a switch I'm okay making right now.
Absolutely. 100%. I would be very comfortable making that switch from Walker to Vidal. And also I should bet on Ken Walker hitting 100 yards this week.
We've got the betting, like hedging against ourselves parlay. That should be the final section of this show every single week. But Green Bay Packers, Arizona Cardinals, Josh Jacobs limited with an illness.
I do want to say on the Charger, just the Oronde Gadsden of it all, because we saw Gadsden kind of step in there as he was really the nominal wide receiver 3. They had Trey Harris playing
Quentin Johnson snaps out there.
Yeah, Trey Harris was basically treated like a tight end, like a blocking tight end, and they had Gadsden. But I think if all 3 receivers are active, I'd be really hesitant to go to Gadsden. I think that we know the pecking order in these receivers. And Mad Lad, he's rolling. The Chargers, they had that Mad Lad post. They pulled it down. But I think McConkey is the real story here, that I think that it's clicked. I expect that McConkey, the early season concerns should be abated somewhat.
So another interesting nugget that I pulled up when I was kind of digging into like personnel groupings and usage earlier this week, tight ends are a focal point of the modern day NFL. Every team has a tight end. Most teams have multiple tight ends. I talk about this huge boom in 12 personnel. Jeff, there isn't a team out there that runs more than 1% of their snaps without a tight end on the field. Like every single team, you look at their like no tight end set and it's like 0.6%, 0.7%, 0.8%. The Chargers are doing this on nearly 20% of their snaps. Like they are the only team out there that says like we have a good enough offensive line and we trust our receivers as blockers that they run these sets. And they've got a Rondé Gatson, they've got Will Dissly, they've got Tyler Conklin. Like they have 3 capable NFL running backs, and they're still taking 20% of their offensive snaps without a tight end on the field. So I don't know what that means for fantasy, but just like a very interesting nugget to dig up where like the entire league is trending towards 12 personnel and the Chargers are saying, what happens if we just don't have a tight end?
They have I want to I'm gonna try to look at their usage real quick because my hunch is that they have. So are you considering Tucker Fisk not a tight end in that conversation? Probably.
He would be a fullback, right?
Yeah, we've got him listed as a tight end under our snap counts, but I think some sites might view him as a fullback. So that's where I'm wondering if you pulled your sample that had Tucker Fisk as they're comfortable playing. It's like almost like Kyle Juszczyk is a fullback, but also he kind of is a tight end.
Patrick Ricard, which makes
Patrick
a lot of sense coming from
Matlock
Greg Roman. Yeah, like coming from the Greg Roman offense where you'll see him kind of doing a little bit of tight end and fullback type of stuff.
Yeah, that's where, that offshoot of Ricard of the I think there's some Juszczyk. I mean, Juszczyk obviously was a Raven to start his career. So sometimes you get these fullbacks that are also kind of tight ends.
Scott Matlock does that a lot too. You'll see Scott Matlock like line up as a fullback and then get kicked out to tight end. So that's a good call. I don't know about Tucker Fisk, how they've got him ranked. I'm pulling this from Sumner Sports, so not exactly sure, but I will reach out to somebody over there and see. But let's move on. Green Bay Packers, Arizona Cardinals. What was that?
Look for Matlock too, because I wonder.
I know Matlock is definitely a fullback, but he does get a lot of that Ricard treatment where he'll line up as a tight end. But again, like that's, and I talk about it in my article as well, is like offensive coordinators right now are just like stretching the limits on what is possible. And I talk about the Bears Commanders game as well, that like you can see them come out in 11 personnel, but Deebo Samuel's in the backfield and DJ Moore's in the backfield. And, even last night, like we saw on that Darnell Washington touchdown, DK Metcalf was lined up as the fullback in that formation. Like offensive coordinators are just doing things so creatively that we haven't seen a lot of. And it's just we're living in a fun, imaginative era of the NFL. Green Bay Packers and Arizona Cardinals. Josh Jacobs dealing with an illness. Matthew Golden practicing in full with a shoulder injury. Christian Watson coming back from that ACL tear last year, limited participation. Dontavian Wicks also dealing with a knee injury. He has been limited. Kyler Murray has been limited. Doesn't sound like he's going to be ready to go, though. Still dealing with that foot injury. Marvin Harrison Jr. limited with a concussion. We really want to see him log a full practice today on Friday if we expect him to be out there this weekend. Zay Jones dealing with a knee injury. He hasn't practiced. Michael Wilson dealing with a foot injury was limited, upgraded to a full participation on Thursday. And then Amari DiMercato dealing with an ankle injury, not practicing. So of all the games that we've talked about this week, this is the injury one, Jeff. Like everybody is banged up in this matchup for the most part. Nothing too serious for the Packers. They've got a lot of guys on the injury report, but they're mostly limited or practicing in full. We expect to see them out there, not the marquee names. But the Arizona Cardinals, it looks like we're trending towards another Jacoby Brissett start with potentially no Marvin Harrison Jr., no Zay Jones, no Amari DiMercato. And Amari DiMercato, not a huge name, but he's their pass-catching back. I mean, when I look at this situation, I just see 25 targets going to Trey McBride.
Yeah, I think that's the only piece that, I mean, if you need it, if you need a stream, like I think Bam Knight and Michael Carter probably are both in the stream conversation. Like if you need it, because if you built zero RB and you just need a running back too, I think you can put them in the conversation. I don't feel great about either, but yeah, I mean, Trey McBride is in every single lineup. This is the Packers have struggled a bit against tight ends. That's been the way that they've been attacked by some teams. And so McBride, I think, just gets hammered with usage. It's like, I don't know what else you have. I mean, the real conversation of it, you have Marvin Harrison Jr. out there and you barely felt good playing Marvin Harrison Jr. So the idea that you're going to feel good playing like Michael Wilson or Greg Dortch or something like that, like, no, probably not. And Keyshawn Nixon's been really, really good as a shutdown corner for the Packers. So whatever they put out there, Keyshawn Nixon's going to take out one of those guys. So that's where, like, it's like Trey McBride. It's like
Trey McBride's going to be in what 80% of DFS lineups this week. Like who's not getting like? I don't know if there's a chalkier
very popular. Yeah, we did the DFS show last night, and our friend Phil Alexander was talking about his cash game lineup build and utilizing Trey McBride in that at 5,700. He's kind of priced above most tight ends, but it's almost he's playing two tight ends in his lineup. Phil was saying because he's really kind of just viewing McBride as a wide receiver in the flex spot, and then having the tight ends have really kind of a path to getting their cheaper salary, and it lets you play some other spots. So kind of viewing Trey McBride as a wide receiver in a DFS lineup.
I'm going to ask you the same question that I posed to Julia Papworth on the Launchpad yesterday. Jeff, like, you know how sharp fantasy managers have gotten. Like, people aren't drafting wide receiver 7s and tight end 3s anymore. Like, everybody's stashing these injury away running backs, which leads me to the question, why is Emmanuel Wilson, arguably like one of the most elite handcuffs in fantasy football, only rostered in 3% of leagues?
I don't understand it, because I mean, a lot of it, we did all the reporting this summer doing the show with our friend Dan Hendry, and we were talking, Emmanuel Wilson's the handcuff to have. And I know we talked about it in base camp of, like, I put a message in the summer of, it's really curious to me why nobody's touching him. And I had people reaching out to me to say, well, it's going to be Marshawn Lloyd. Like, is it not going to be? And I think that's kind of the general assumption, is that even though he's on IR, he's still going to be the backup running back, maybe, is where, and I do
if the running back gets injured, they'll go to their injured running back to pick up the slack.
And we fall into the trap sometimes of just deciding that we don't think Emmanuel Wilson's a very good player. So why do I need to have him? I think we also, maybe a more fair way to look at it is that when Josh Jacobs was out of the lineup, they really mixed up the usage between having Chris Brooks, having Emmanuel Wilson. So like you want to make an argument that it's not a clean backup. I think it's a pretty clean backup. I think it's Emmanuel Wilson, and I think that he should be rostered in a lot of leagues. But I see the exact same thing. I see we're in these deep dynasty leagues together, and
He's
I'm
not
looking
in
at
any of the leagues that you and I are in. It's either me or you having Emmanuel Wilson in every single league that we're in.
Because I see the wire, and it's like, what does this guy do? It's like guys that are just like not even close to being relevant at all, and then Wilson's sitting there. It's like, well, I'm gonna put him into a spot for sure.
And I do a lot of these NFFC leagues where there are 20 roster spots. Like, waivers are barren. Like still this week, like last week, like every single week when I'm like, getting rid of some of my excess wide receivers, I just keep picking Emmanuel Wilson up, and he's available in like almost every single league. I do not get it. And I know Josh Jacobs has been a workhorse. He's been an Iron Man. He doesn't get hurt frequently, but one game, like, if he's got an illness right now, like if he's got the flu on Sunday morning and Emmanuel Wilson's the starter, like you're looking at a 25-point game. I don't expect it to happen, but yeah, go pick up Emmanuel Wilson. Like don't be the one that spends 100% of your fab after Josh Jacobs gets hurt. Get him for free now and just keep him stashed on your bench.
Yeah, so we're in a redraft league together with our friend Peter, and I don't know for sure what country they're from, and I do apologize.
Serbia.
Serbia. Yeah, and Peter is amazing. Peter consumes all of our content. He's a fantastic supporter, and he had reached out to us and just a couple of handful of friends around the industry, just like it's like 4 of his buddies, and he just kind of like built like every fan's dream basically of like, these are my favorite fantasy analysts. I'm just gonna ask him if they'll be in this league.
Daigle, Pat Fitzmaurice,
we're like year 4 or 5 of this league now, and it's usually our very first redraft league that we do. But I was looking at like managing my team this week, and I was like, well, Christian Watson's available, and this is a deeper league. I was like, Watson's available. I'm going to pick him up, and I'm going to put him into my IR spot, and that gives me another opportunity to add a player, and I'll add Emmanuel Wilson with my other pick here. I get a 2-for-1. I stash Watson. So that's the other thing out there. If you got open IR spots right now, grab Watson and stash him into an IR spot. It might be sooner rather than later, but if you've got an open IR spot, Watson should not be sitting on waivers in your league. You should be stashing him into that IR spot, because my expectation on this Packers offense, the running backs, we've seen the usage for Josh Jacobs in the past game. He's averaged 6 targets per game since Jaden Reed went down. That's pacing to 100 targets on the season. He was about 40 targets last year. So that unlocks a new element for Josh Jacobs to get to fantasy production. But the wide receiver core, we know Dontavian Wicks dealing with an injury. Malik Heath outsnapped Dontavian Wicks last week. It's nothing. It's pointless. Right. It's going to be Christian Watson's spot along in a rotation of Romeo Doubs and Matthew Golden as the pieces that you want for the Packers receivers.
And I think, it was decent process in the preseason to just completely fade Christian Watson. But now with Jaden Reed out of the picture, we're seeing Matthew Golden do a lot of that Jaden Reed stuff. And Christian Watson could go right back into his role as that outside receiver, vertical threat. Of course, there are concerns, coming off an ACL. Is his speed still going to be there? It might take him a little bit of a ramp up time, but he's going to be near a full-time player within the next few weeks. Shocked and happy to see him back at practice already. Let's move on. We got a few games left. Late afternoon slate. This is the last one of the day. Washington Commanders at Dallas Cowboys, NFC East matchup. This is going to be a fun one. Terry McLaurin not practicing with a hamstring. Chris Rodriguez not practicing with a calf. Deebo Samuel not practicing with a heel. Jaden Daniels is practicing in full, coming off that knee sprain, but still on the injury report. Zach Ertz didn't practice on Wednesday with a shoulder injury, but practiced in full on Thursday. So a lot of injuries here. And I think the one that might concern me most, first of all, I don't expect Terry McLaurin to be out there. Sounds like this is another week missed for Terry McLaurin. But Deebo Samuel, Jeff, I feel like we've talked about this a million times over the last few years. When Deebo Samuel's hurt, he is not good. Like, it's just when he's got a clean bill of health, one of the best wide receivers in football, when he is dealing with some sort of ailment, it really impacts his play. And we saw that last week. Like, it did not look like the Deebo Samuel we've seen through the first chunk of the season, and now still dealing with this injury, unable to practice. I'm lowering expectations for Deebo Samuel again, even though you'd expect him to smash against a bad defense with Terry McLaurin likely to be out.
Yeah, and I think that this is not the Dowdle conversation, but it is kind of the Dowdle conversation of, if you're looking at ranks, I think it's very safe to be a lot lower on Deebo Samuel this week.
But you're still starting.
Yeah, you're still starting him.
Yeah.
Like you're
Yeah.
starting 3 wide receivers. You're getting this Dallas spot. You're still going to start Deebo Samuel if he's
I've got
active.
him
You're
in
gonna,
like the Keenan Allen, Chris Olave, Stephon Diggs range, which like this is a guy who's been a top 5 receiver for a bunch of weeks. Like you'd think that you'd be ranking him as a wide receiver 1, but I'm a little bit more cautious this week. But yeah, probably not meaningful whatsoever for people who are just looking to set their fantasy lineups.
Right. Exactly that. And the other part of it too is we just talked about Arizona. If you're actually out here thinking about starting an Arizona wide receiver with Marvin Harrison out, just stop and just go like Chris Moore or Jalen Lane or Luke McCaffrey. If if Deebo Samuel is out and if McLaurin's out, I mean, that's going to be like your desperation plug-in spot is, and I don't really know who to recommend out of them. I think that we've seen all of them make big plays down the field. And so that's part of it, that potential is there. But this matchup is just so juicy against Dallas. We've seen how all these games have worked out. And so just it's going to be your best, if you would need just a deep punt in DFS, if you just need, or in a deep league and you've got that one spot that you need to fill, again, Chris Moore, Jalen Lane, or Luke McCaffrey might be options that you can explore.
For the Dallas Cowboys, we got CeeDee Lamb and Cavante Turpin both back at practice. CeeDee Lamb said that he could have played last week, but that he just wanted to give it another week of rest so he could be 100%, not limited in the game, and probably saving some of that juice for a divisional matchup. So no questions here. We're getting CeeDee Lamb back in our lineups. Cavante Turpin still limited throughout practice. Probably not really antsy to get him in lineups, especially with the breakout of George Pickens. This feels like if you're relying on Cavante Turpin, there's got to be a better option out there on the waiver wire. Like, I like Cavante Turpin. I think he's a fun player, but this probably isn't a matchup that I'm trying to get him in my lineups.
I'm fine with the matchup. It's just that if you put CeeDee Lamb back in the lineup and you've got George Pickens and you've got Jake Ferguson, like you're just it's not there for Turpin anymore. I think the frustrating thing is that
the window was there for Turpin. Like we thought he'd smash. Well, CeeDee Lamb was out, and then he immediately got hurt himself, and then now they're coming back at the same time, and it's like, well, what should have been the window for Turpin to smash ended up being Ryan Flournoy and Jalen Tolbert, and the guys that we didn't think to draft.
Yeah, Ryan Flournoy had that big blow-up spot against the Jets, and that would have been the Cavante Turpin spot, but instead it was Flournoy, and now. I do expect that Turpin, if he's active and healthy, to be the nominal wide receiver 3. It's just back to the start of the season. What does the wide receiver 3 look like in this offense? And Jalen Tolbert's been drawing like 6 targets per game and not doing anything with those targets. Right. You're going to have CeeDee Lamb being treated like CeeDee Lamb. You're going to have George Pickens. You're not going to want to unplug that. And then Ferguson contributing as well. It's just, you're getting really cute if you're thinking about Cavante Turpin at this point.
Sunday Night Football. This is another game with a ton of
backfield for the command for Dallas, because I know that contingent upside. Jaden Blue is like the play. I think it's all Javonte Williams. I mean, he's stashed Blue, but part of me, if you're in a super deep league, I feel like Phil Maffa should be a stash at this point, because if we see Javonte Williams go down, I don't think they're comfortable putting Blue into any sort of a feature role. And Hunter Lupke
is still on IR.
He's on IR, but he can be like activated. And I think it was the type of thing when they put him on IR.
You just did the Marshawn Lloyd thing, Jeff.
No. When Maffa was put on IR, it was cut down day, and it was like he's probably not hurt for 4 games, but we can stash him on IR. We have the availability to do that. I'm saying in an instance that Javonte Williams is injured, we know Miles Sanders is out of the picture. I think that Maffa's worthwhile stashing if you have an open IR spot or very deep leagues, because he did get dropped in some deep dynasty leagues when that happened. That's, I think, is a play worth stashing. Hunter Lupke,
I did think it was funny, real just with Jaden Blue. Like, Jaden Blue was a guy that they were. There was a lot of hype about Jaden Blue this preseason, and then that hype swelled a little bit when Miles Sanders was out of the picture. And you saw the story, right? Like he showed up to practice with some Louis Vuitton cleats on and gave himself blisters on his feet. It's like, not really doing much to buck those maturity concerns that people have had about him. So just kind of a funny story if you missed that a couple of weeks ago. But I'm with you. Like Jaden Blue, he's worth a stash in some leagues, but not a guy that I'm trying to get too overexposed on. Sunday Night Football, Falcons at 49ers. Everybody's hurt in this matchup. Darnell Mooney is limited with a hamstring injury. Ray McLeod got a DNP on Thursday, but they're saying it's not injury related, just rest. For the 49ers, of course, there are just so many injuries here. Brock Purdy dealing with this turf toe is still limited. Mac Jones dealing with a knee and an oblique, limited on Wednesday, full participant on Thursday. And it was kind of funny. I've never heard a coach say this before. They asked Kyle Shanahan about Brock Purdy and Mac Jones, and he said, well, they were both limited, but Brock was more limited than Mac was. Thought that was a funny comment. George Kittle has not, or I'm sorry, a limited practice coming back from that hamstring injury. Juwan Jennings, ankle, ribs, and shoulder. He is limited. Ricky Pearsall not practicing with a knee injury. Marquez Valdez-Scantling not practicing with a calf injury. Sky Moore not practicing with an ankle injury. Christian McCaffrey got a rest day. I mean, it has just been brutal. And then we're not even talking about the defense on the show, but then you also look at, Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. Like, it's just one injury after another for the 49ers here. So, Jeff, I'm looking at this right now and just seems to me like we're set up for another Kendrick Bourne smash spot, right?
Yeah, I mean that until it fails you, it's the Rico Dowdle effect. Maybe you've got back-to-back. I think it's funny. It was exactly 142 yards in back-to-back weeks, and so you're plugging that back in. You're going back to that. Well, I think long term, we know getting Pearsall back, getting Kittle back, Bourne will probably play until they've got Ayuk and everybody's fully up, but it's that role's not going to be the same. But I think right now you would expect that role to be there. I think the Falcons are really good defensively, and I don't know that that's fully been realized. I mean, I'm very frustrated as a Bills fan, but something that put it in a little bit of context was that Jeff Ulbrich, when he was with the Jets, also owned Josh Allen, and now the Jets don't own Josh Allen anymore. But basically the last 3 games against Ulbrich that Allen has played has been really brutal for Josh Allen. I mean, the Falcons are just blitzing like no other. And they've got AJ Terrell. We know he's a high-end cornerback. Jesse Bates is a really strong safety. I think the Falcons defense is, I wouldn't laugh at it anymore and be a matchup to target. I think the Falcons defense has been really strong. So I'm not expecting Bourne to get back to where he's done the last 2 weeks because of that strong defense, but he's still going to be very involved. And, if you're starting 3 wide receivers, if you're in deeper leagues, Bourne is still going to be in my deep lineups.
Yeah. And I mean, you say deep lineups, ranking it as if we're going to see Juwan Jennings limping around on the field again and all of these other players not on the field. I've got Kendrick Bourne this week as my wide receiver 21. So still very, not very, but pretty aggressive on Kendrick Bourne, just because we've seen he's got that connection with Mac Jones. He is getting those deep crossing routes that are so valuable in this offense. So firing him up with a lot of confidence here. And then did you see the George Kittle thing? He said that he fully tore his hamstring.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people doubting that. A lot of doctors saying that is physically impossible to tear a hamstring and come back in a few weeks. Kind of got Mike Tyson vibes. Do you remember when he had that boxing match that he lost? And I broke my back. It was spinal. Yeah, broke my spine. And that's kind of the vibe that I got from George Kittle here. Maybe misinterpreted what the doctor told him. But
maybe some of that, but maybe also it's George Kittle. And, he's on the very, very shortest list of players that I feel like just doesn't power.
I mean, he is different. Built different. Absolutely. # built different, George Kittle. Yeah. Monday Night Football, we got another doubleheader here. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at
Falcons.
Detroit.
I'd like to talk about the Falcons because I feel like the weirdest narrative that I'm seeing is the splits with Darnell Mooney in the lineup and Drake London, and not taking into
that Drake London was hurt in those games.
Well, but also Kirk Cousins was the quarterback in those games, and so it's the wildest thing that I'm out. And I said, as long as people are going to write off what Drake London is doing, try to buy Drake London. And I got a lot of blowback. You can't buy Drake London now, not after that. No, you can still buying high and still not necessarily buying high. I think that London should be in the conversation for wide receiver 3-ish for the rest of the season. And so if you're paying a wide receiver 9 price on Drake London still, I mean, you're still potentially buying at a great price because I think it's definitely there for London. And we saw they had that terrible game against the Panthers. After that, they brought Zach Robinson down the sideline. All Zach Robinson has done after that game is say, give the ball to Bijan Robinson, give the ball to Drake London, give the ball to our dudes. It's been really exactly the anti-Arthur Smith of it all, of exactly what you want to see for your Falcons usage in fantasy.
And Jeff, this is the Dynasty show. I think this is probably the first time we've actually talked about Dynasty today. But Drake London, I know you say keep trade cut isn't the real world, but I think there's still something to be said for it. Drake London right now is the wide receiver 9 in Dynasty. Like, what are we doing? This guy's 24 years old, like consistently pulling a 30+ target share year after year after year. I don't understand it. And I know like there's other guys, but like right now, Malik Neighbors is still ranked ahead of Drake London. So if you're telling me that I could trade my Malik Neighbors, who's out for the rest of the season, coming back from an ACL tear next year, if I can get my Malik Neighbors and turn that into Drake London plus something else, that's I'm doing that. And I don't know if you can do that in real world, but Keep Trade Cut tells me that you can do that. Emeka Egbuka right now, who is injured, and like, there have been flashes. I would prefer Drake London ahead of Emeka Egbuka in fantasy.
Oh man, that's I'm gonna have to see if I can get some London for But where do you have London ranked in your rest of season ranks?
Good thing you asked, and thank you. I've got him as wide receiver 6, but you can make a pretty strong argument to put him ahead of Justin Jefferson. So wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6. I prefer JSN, Amon-Ra, Chase, and Puka ahead of him.
Yeah, and that's where, and I think just theory-wise, some of you can't buy him right now, but I think at the same time, you've probably got some people out there that have been frustrated because they're reading now about splits with Darnell Mooney or these other things, not taking the full context into that and saying, maybe this is my chance to sell high on Drake London. I think that some of the times that opens up trade opportunities. You think, I don't want to buy high on a player, but meanwhile, that person's thinking, I'm selling him at full value. I'm saying that I think the opportunity for him to continue to rise is definitely there.
So let's move on to Monday Night Football doubleheader here. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at Detroit Lions in what could potentially be a battle for the NFC 1 seed. I mean, this two really good teams in the NFC right now. I'm very, very excited for this one. Mike Evans back at practice. He's missed the last couple of games. And remember, there's no Wednesday practices, so all we get is the one data point from Thursday when we're discussing these games. But Mike Evans was back at practice yesterday, limited. Emeka Egbuka did not practice, expected to miss some time here. Chris Godwin also did not practice. Bucky Irving also did not practice. So we know that the Buccaneers are very, very, very beat up. Then on the flip side, we got the Lions, who aren't dealing with a single fantasy relevant player who's dealing with an injury right now. So, tough go for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. But Jeff, we're expecting to have no Emeka Egbuka. We're expecting to have no Chris Godwin. We're expecting to have no Bucky Irving. Mike Evans, we think that he might be out there, but I think there's a very high risk that he just kind of plays in this decoy route, because we've seen the Bucs do that a lot before, where they'll put Mike Evans out there not at 100%. And I think they're trying to get any edge they can in this game. So I think the Buccaneers wide receivers probably are the major discussion point here.
Yeah, absolutely. They have to be. I mean, it all makes a lot more sense if Mike Evans is active, because you can put Mike Evans into the X role. You've got Sterling Shepard as the slot receiver. You've got Tez Johnson playing as the F receiver, the flanker on the other side. So, I mean, that I think makes a lot of sense naturally. You've got volume going to K-Dot, and it's without Evans, that's probably the more interesting conversation. I think Cameron Johnson would be the player there, and that's where
that's it.
I think definitely Dynasty Tez Johnson would be the target. I think that if you're just looking in 1 week without Mike Evans, Cameron Johnson, I will probably rank him above Tez Johnson. But if I were to look at a player that could be, if I'm looking for the next 5 games or so, I would have Tez Johnson as the move there, is kind of just viewing it that way. And I don't know.
To build off of that, I also like, there's a fork in the road. Like, is Mike Evans playing? Is Mike Evans not playing? And I think if Mike Evans is playing, Tez Johnson is the high upside fun play. Sterling Shepard is kind of the boring, hey, I just want to get 8 points and, get a little something in a PPR league. And I think Cameron Johnson is completely off the radar. But if Mike Evans is out again, I think Cameron Johnson's the guy that I'm going to rank highest of all of the Buccaneers wide receivers.
And I absolutely agree with that. And I think it's sometimes with the Rams, I feel like I look at the Rams and it's like you've got, like last year with Nakua and Kupp, or this year with Adams, and it's less this year because the numbers are getting there, but having Adams and Nakua, it's the type of thing of like, you've got 2 top 8 fantasy wide receivers. Why is Matthew Stafford the quarterback 22 like type thing sometimes with that conversation?
Reminds me of the Ben Roethlisberger with the Steelers, where he was like supporting like all of these fantasy relevant players, and he was like the QB 27.
I feel like the Bucks are the opposite of that. Of like, I feel like you're gonna like look at the box score on Sunday and be like, well, this guy had 30 yards and this guy had 29. How did Baker Mayfield throw for 315 and 4 touchdowns? Like it was like are they missing guys out of this box score? Like I feel like that's where like Mayfield is kind of just elevated himself to a level of like it just feels like it's really hard to set him in your fantasy lineup because you're getting so much production. The Lions are a potential shootout spot here, and it's like you could not feel good about any of the pass catchers, but at the same time, it's like for some reason, somehow Baker Mayfield's going to get there in terms of fantasy.
So the Lions are healthy. I think the major news story this week is that Dan Campbell said that he wants to see David Montgomery more involved. And I did a show with Greg Branos from Coach Speak Index a while ago, and he made kind of a funny point. Like there's some guys that keep the cards close to the chest and try to play mind games and whatnot. And he's like, Dan Campbell is the type of coach that will like look you dead in the eyes and he'll tell you the exact play that he's going to run, and then he's going to run down your throat and do it. Like there's no mind games or psychology. Like if Dan Campbell says he's going to do something, you take it at face value because he's going to do it. So on one hand, I want to say like, no, Jahmyr Gibbs is great. And like, he's starting to pull away with the job because this is what we always want to do is imagine that the young running back's going to run away with the job. But when Dan Campbell comes out and says, we're going to get David Montgomery more involved, I tend to think that David Montgomery is going to be a little bit more involved in this game.
Yeah. And I think that if you were just look at, he's running back 15, he's had a couple spike. If you just look at those like surface level things, it's easy to think that nothing has changed all that much with the Lions. I think if you dig into the usage, it's changed dramatically where it has gone from almost a dead 50-50 split to like 65-35 in favor of Jahmyr Gibbs, and sometimes even more in favor of Jahmyr Gibbs.
80-20 game.
Yeah. And so I think that that's where Campbell's coming out and seeing that there is, and you're coming off a loss, so you're going to look at harder at some things off of a loss. And I do think that they're seeing, Montgomery is fading away here. We need to make sure he's a very good player, very good part of this offense. We need to make sure that doesn't happen. I think the encouraging thing with the Lions is even though they lost, the involvement of Jameson Williams and really just seeing them being focused, hyper-targeting Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown last week, and Sam Laporta, and kind of it feels like and maybe they'll have games here or there where it goes the other way, but there wasn't any Brock Wright, there wasn't any Isaac Tisla, there wasn't any Khalif Raymond. It was like just our dudes. Like, let's get the ball to our dudes and get them going, and that's exactly what you want to see happening.
So let's talk about the final game of the week here, Jeff. Houston Texans at Seattle Seahawks. Again, this Monday night doubleheader. None of these guys had any practices on Wednesday, so we're only looking at Thursday. And this is so rare. I don't know when we've ever seen a game like this midseason. All the fantasy relevant players for both teams are healthy. Like, this is awesome to see, especially where we've got a lot of Texans, Nico Collins, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet. These guys are all like regulars on the injury report. Everybody's healthy going into this matchup. So we really like to see that. I think the takeaway here is that the Houston Texans are a little bit better than what we may have thought early in the season. Seems like that defense is starting to mesh. We're seeing CJ Stroud string together back-to-back decent games. Of course, we know who the Seattle Seahawks are. They've been great this year. Sam Darnold is looking fantastic. He's keeping JSN alive. We talked about AJ Barner on our show yesterday. So a lot of things and a lot of pieces to get excited about in this offense. I think the one positional group that I don't have a clear read on, Texans backfield. I have no idea what to make out, and I'll do this every now and then where I just kind of cop out in my rankings. I just put Woody Mark and Nick Chubb back to back in my rankings as wide receiver threes, kind of throwing my hands up and saying, I don't know what's going to happen here.
So the Seahawks run defense has been phenomenal. They are the second highest or second lowest, whatever it is, EPA against the run defense. They stonewalled Travis Etienne last week. That's where I lean probably towards Woody Marks in terms of if they can't get any run game going, then they're going to just rely on the passing back and the passing game. And It feels like a Woody Marks type of an opportunity this week against what we've seen some of these Seattle games turn into shootouts. And I think that should CJ Stroud play up to his level, this should be a shootout as well. Going with that passing back would be the play for me, and it'll be that play in my ranks. You see, I think you talk about the Texans. I think more often than not, probably if you just double down on the panic players in week 2 and 3, or the panic team in week 2 or 3 that you think is good or like is just inexplicable, like that is going to be a winning strategy more often than I think. The worst moves of the fantasy season are made in weeks 2 and 3, where it's not that it's easy to tell you week 1, like, we'll see what happens next week. It's like week 2, week 3 is full blown, like 5-alarm, like this is how it's going to be the entire rest of the season. And almost every single scenario, if you were to look at last year, and I'd like to do early in the season, I like to do a lot of, hey, this guy was here last year and look where he ended up. I mean, Jamar Chase was the wide receiver 4 through week 9 last year, and look where he ended up. So like it's changes through the season, and the Texans are a good football team. The Texans are not the 0-3 5-alarm panic, like everything's a mess here. That's not what the Texans are. The Texans are a good football team, and should be a good matchup because Seattle's a good football team as well.
Yeah, I love both these matchups, and I think people are going to see the Bucs and the Lions is definitely like the marquee matchup of the two. But wouldn't surprise me if this other game ends up being just as good, if not more exciting. So really fun slate coming up here. Jeff, we're going to come in just under the 2-hour mark today. These episodes just tend to get progressively longer every single season as we get more information and more to talk about. So thanks to anybody who actually took the time to stick through this entire episode today. It's one of my favorite episodes to do every single week. Really helps me kind of lock in, get an idea for the upcoming slate. Jeff, nobody I'd rather do it with. To everybody who took the time to listen, thank you. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. Good luck this week, and we will see you next week.